my pleasure and honor to introduce to you today, from the University of North Alabama, Dr. Tracy Wiggins.
So first of all, so that I don't forget, because I'm going to by the time we get to the end, thank you to everybody with Mississippi PAS for asking me to do this. The story of how this happened is I was innocently minding my business in the exhibit hall at PASIC. And Dr. Franz comes walking by and is like, hey, I need to talk to you. And you know, in the exhibit hall, it's really, really loud. And so what I actually heard was, but then he came over and told me, he's like, we want you to do this day of percussion. So I'm super excited to be here with you all. A disclaimer that I put at the beginning of any clinic session that I do is that this is my way of doing things, my approach to things. If you hear something that is different than how you have been taught, that in no way discounts anything that your teachers have done. I've been watching the groups all day today. Y'all are great. You guys are getting great education over here. You've got some great percussion teaching going on in this state. It's awesome to see. I'm just here to give you kind of my approach to things, okay? So a little bit about my background is that I kind of do a little bit of everything, right? My daily job can literally include teaching percussion lessons, teaching John Cage percussion ensemble piece, chasing a drum line around the field at a band rehearsal, and then going to a symphony rehearsal that evening. And that's not making that up. That is actually what my job entails. So one of the things that I've learned is that I have to have a technique and approach and things that can work across a wide variety of instruments easily. The idea is that, first of all, point to these percussion that is up here. Okay, here's the thing. There is not a percussion instrument. Percussion is not an instrument. Percussion is a family of instruments. Percussion is a theory. Percussion is a grouping of things, but there is not an actual percussion. If you ask someone to play what they play the clarinet, you immediately know what they play. They play the black stick of death, right? Okay? If you hear someone that plays the trumpet, you know that they're lucky that they made it through the door because their ego let them get it, okay? But if you play percussion, it could be any number of things that you play. And there's so many branches of the percussion family, too. You can be a jazz vibraphone artist, you can be a drum set artist, you can be a Ghanaian African drumming specialist. All of these are separate career paths that you can go into percussion. And that's one of the fascinating things about being a percussionist, is if you don't feel like practicing one thing, go practice something else that day, right? But there are things that transfer from family to family of our instruments. That if you've got basic foundational concepts that you can make work as you go between different things. All right, so first things first, everybody stand up. Oh, you did not know this was audience participation, did you? All right, make sure that you've got some room around you. This is the perfect time of day to do this because everybody's a little sleepy and everything, okay? How many of you warm up before you play? Some of you are lying. I know this. All right. Just because you warm up for drumline doesn't count because that doesn't mean you don't go into practice. How many of you stretch before you play? Yeah, that's less hands. Okay. Here's the thing. The activity of drumming on its conceptual level is actually really, really bad for the human body, right? Because it actually is a repetitive stress action that can lead to repetitive stress injuries like carpal tunnel syndrome. Okay? If your body, your hands, etc., are not actually warmed up before you start to play, you can actually run the risk of doing damage to yourself. So something that I tell my students all the time is that I want them to have some just super basic stretching exercises that they can do before they start to try to play. So the first thing first is just shake your hands out there. As the youths say, shake it like the Polaroid picture. Right, I am them with the youths. All right? Yeah, just kind of roll your wrist around a little bit. All we're trying to do is get the blood moving. All right? Now kind of flick your fingers like you're trying to flick water off of it. Sweet. Now put your hands down to your side. Now just kind of gently roll your shoulders up and around a little bit. Listen to all the popping, especially the older teachers in the room. That is me. Go back the other direction. All right, now kind of make like some pretty good sized circles with your arms. What we're trying to do is loosen up all of these muscles that we're going to have to use in playing. All right, good. Put your hands together like this. Now, keeping your elbows here, try to bring your hands down below your elbows. I see the faces. Okay. Now, flip it over. Pull the hands up while you push the elbows down. All right. Shake it good. All right. Now, put your hand up in front of your face. We're going to pull back towards your body. Don't stick your other hand up there. You're going to literally break your fingers off. Just pull back with your fingers. Then go down. It is great. Shake it, switch hands. Pull back towards your body. Then down. Everybody feeling more awake now? Third. All right, shake it. All right, now this is the personal favorite of all of my students, and what I mean by this is they really, really hate this. Arms up to the side. Make sure that you've got room for them to be straight. Now, roll forward. Feel that stretch?
Roll wood.
Roll it up and to the back. You probably felt popping as you went. I know I did. Now, up straight. Now what you're going to do is you're going to keep your fingers pulled back, your arms straight, and you're going to very slowly bring your arms straight down to the side. Keep everything pulled back as you go. Ooh. All right, shake it out. Good. All right. Last thing we're going to do. Index finger to thumb. I lied. This is the next to last thing. Middle finger to thumb. Ring finger to thumb. This is where things escalate quickly. Pinky to thumb. Then thumb to index finger. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to work on these smaller appendages that we have to use when we drum. Okay? Last thing, shake it out good. Put your hands back together like this. How many of you know the name Josh Jones? All right. If you do not know who Josh Jones is, he is very prominent on the Instagrams and the YouTubes and all of those places. He is the principal percussionist of the Kansas City Symphony. He has some great instructional materials. One of the things that he does when he wakes up every day is he does like 1,000 claps. Right? So, trust me, we ain't getting to 1,000. Okay? But the whole idea is that what he's doing is he's working the wrist hinge that we use when we play. Right? Okay? Now, it's cute that you think it goes that slow. When I say clapping, I mean we're going. Shortened version. You can all sit down now. All right. Everybody feel more alive and more awake now? You feel like you have arthritis? I mean, it's a thing. Okay. So, that took about, what, 2 or 3 minutes, right? Okay. But here's the thing. That 2 or 3 minutes can save you a lot of issues down the line when it comes time to preventing injury and stuff like that when you go to practice and when you go to play. So many times, students roll into the practice room, and the first thing they do is play the hardest thing that they know without having been warmed up or anything else. And all you're going to do is build up over time. Bad technique, bad body maintenance. College students especially are horrible at taking care of themselves. I spend so much time talking to my students about, you should eat. Eating is good. We like eating. Sleeping, also good. Okay? And warming up like that, stretching out, is also part of that equation. Right? You have to take care of yourself to be able to do the things that we want to do. All right, remember when I told you you could sit down? I lied. Stand back up. Okay. All right. So, let's talk about anatomy for a second. Okay? Everybody stand with their feet just about shoulder width apart. Okay? Now, as you stand there, I want you to think about where your toes are in your shoes. Right? Your toes should not be scrunched up like this, because that is not how the human body is designed. Your toes should be open, spread. Right? If you do that, do you notice how suddenly you feel a little bit more secure down there in your feet? All right, I learned a lot of this studying something called Alexander technique, right? Which is a phenomenal way to learn how like the body works and how the body should move and everything. All right. So one of the things that they talk about is the fact that everything in your body is supposed to be open and spread, right? What that does is that if there's any sort of tension, that compresses nerves in the spine, and that can lead to tension and injury when you go to play. So one of the things that they talk about initially is your feet, because we stand on our feet all the time. So what I want you to do as you're standing here, clench your toes together. Now, open them up. Clench them together again. And then open them up. Now, next thing, kind of shake your knees around. Right. Now, your knees should be loose and flexed and relaxed, okay, when you stand here. They shouldn't feel tight. They shouldn't feel locked. Don't want anyone passing out in this, because that's not going to look good for PA. Okay? Don't want to kill anybody here in this clinic. All right? Hips. Loosen those, shake those hips around. Some of you are getting very uncomfortable with this clinic right now. Okay? But it's good for you. Okay? So now, when you stand there, your knees should be relaxed. Your hips should be loose. Your bottom should be relaxed and loose. All right? You would be amazed how much tension is carried back there. All right? Especially when we get nervous and we clench up. Right? Keep that loose and relaxed. Now, as you're standing here, get that comfortable stance. Loose knees, loose hips, loose rear. Put your hands down to your side. Just let your hands hang there for a second, okay? Now, think about, as you're standing there, think about the fact that as your hands hang there, the fingers are all kind of loose, they're spread, they shouldn't be clenched together. The fingers naturally kind of curl just a little bit, right? So when I talk about technique, when I talk about how we grip the stick and everything, the place that we start is with that most relaxed, most comfortable hand position of the body. So what I will usually do is have my students just stand there like that, and then I will just walk up and stick a stick in their hand. All I want from them as far as any type of tension in the hand is enough tension to keep the stick from falling out of the hand. All right? My whole approach to everything is about being loose, relaxed, and open. Okay, I call it going with the flow, right? Everything has to flow. Everything has to be fluid. We want no tension in anything that we're doing, okay? So you feel that hand position as it is right there, okay? So if you put the stick in your hand as it is right there, you can put just enough tension on the stick to keep the stick from falling out of your hand and no more, okay? Now, bring your hands up just in front of you. So the next thing that you probably notice is that if you brought your hands up in front of you, for the majority of you, your hands and wrists are not flat. They're slightly curved or they're slightly angled downward, right? If you look up here, you notice that I've got two different types of drums up here, all right? Both of them are slightly angled, okay? You can sit down now, okay? So, I am 100% hashtag team tilt when it comes to our percussion instruments, especially snare drums of any kind, okay? The history of the marching snare drum is that it was originally worn on a sling, right? They had to create a grip on which they could play on a drum that was on a sling. That is where traditional grip came from, okay? It was intended to be played on a drum where the hand had to be at an angle like this, okay? Now, over the years, technology has developed to be able to flatten that instrument out, okay? Which is what has happened. To me, and again, think back to what I said at the beginning, all of this is just my opinion, okay? To me, in order to play on a marching snare drum with a flat grip, you have to hyperextend these muscles a little bit in order to compensate for that to get the angle that you're going to play, okay? So I have my students play, we take that and we loosen it up to where this is loose and relaxed, and then we play with it at tilt, okay? I have been on team tilt since 1998 when it became an option in order to do this, okay? But I want, and I don't do like an extreme tilt. For those of you that want to know, if you've ever seen like Pulse and some of those groups that do the tilt, they're doing it at 12 degrees is the tilt that they use. We don't go that far. Ours is actually like about 8 or 9. And the whole idea is I want just enough to loosen this, not enough for us to have to compensate for it by going even further down, okay? So I want just enough that when I bring my hands up, the drum is kind of aligned to that, okay? It's the same thing on concert snare drum, all right? If I bring my hands up to play concert snare, my hands have a slight downward angle to them, okay? So what I want to do is make sure that when I bring my hands up and I'm going to play on concert snare drum, I'm not adjusting this, right? My first rule of thumb is adjust the instrument to your body, not your body to the instrument, okay? So I always want to make sure that all of this is loose, fluid, and relaxed, okay? Because when I start talking about like the actual technique, all of that's going to become a little bit more of a thing, okay? Now, there are 4 main strokes, right? You all have heard all of this before. This is probably not new information, all right? What are your 4 major strokes that you use when you play drums? Full, down, up, tap. Full, down, tap, up, right? Those are the 4 different things, okay? So, when I talk about using a full stroke, okay, I'm talking about letting the stick and the surface that I'm playing do all of the work to create the rebound for me, okay? I tell my students all the time that drumming should actually be lazy, right? We far too often get in the own way of our own success because we become too involved in the idea of how we create the sound, okay? If I take this tennis ball right here and I throw it at the floor, what is it going to do? It's going to bounce back up, right? Easy, right? If I throw it harder, what's it going to do? It's going to bounce higher. If I throw it softer, or if I throw it to a lower surface, it's not going to come back up as high, right? If I just kind of drop it, doesn't come back up. Throw it harder, comes back up. This is the exact same thing that happens with a drumstick, right? And this is the technique that I teach, is that I want the stick to do the same motion as the tennis ball we use, okay? There's also 4 groups of muscles that we use when we play, okay? You all know arm, wrist, fingers, shoulders is a 4th one, okay? All right, so when we think about this, again, if I throw this ball using just the fingers, what is it going to do? It's probably going to just basically drop right in front of me, right? If I try to throw using just the fingers, it's going to go, okay? If I use just the wrist, it's going to go a little bit farther. If I want to get maximum distance, I have to use the arm and the shoulder and everything, right? And that motion, if I do that, when I bring that arm back, this wrist is loose and fluid, comes back and follows through, okay? That is the genesis of our drumming motion that I want to teach, okay? So the idea is, what I want my students to do is think about throwing the stick at the surface. This actually comes from a lot of timpani setting, right? Fred here, who many of you may have heard of, his approach to teaching timpani was to throw a ball and just let the stick bounce back, right? And you just practice doing that motion. And then when you go to play with the mallet, you're essentially just throwing the mallet and letting the mallet do all of the work of returning back up. Okay? You've all probably heard the term when it comes to timpani of lift, right? I prefer using rebound, right? Because lift, to me, I find a lot of times with students, lift connotates a two-part motion to them, right? A lot of times when a student hears lift, they think that it's a down motion followed by an up motion, right? I want it one motion. I want the arm and everything to bring the stick down, and then the mallet to just come right back up, okay? That is the same thing that I teach on marching snare drum and concert snare drum, okay? So my whole thing that I tell students when they come in is I don't want to teach them how to play marching snare drum, and I don't want to teach them how to play concert snare drum. I don't want to teach those as two different concepts. Ain't nobody got time for that, okay? I want to teach them how to play snare drum, right? So our idea of throwing that stick at the head, that becomes our full drum. Right, so if you take a basic like 8 on a hand type exercise, it's that throwing motion is what we're doing. Okay? I'm not trying to do it all from the wrist, because you hear that's a different sound when I do that, right? That sound should be a little bit shorter, a little bit more articulate. Hear how that opens up? The stick is resonating more, the drum is resonating more. I'm doing less work and getting more volume, okay? And that is the idea that we're trying to go for. All right, so when it comes to like the marching percussion thing, that's what we're thinking. We're thinking throw the stick at the head, and the stick come back up. All right, now, so that's the full stroke, okay? That's the first thing that I teach, okay? Because I always want the most open legato thing that we can get. Think about this. Wind players, the first note they learn how to play is not staccato, right? They learn how to play legato. They have to learn how to play full, round tones and everything. Yet oftentimes on percussion, we start with very wristy, very articulate sounds that we start with, okay? Which is kind of the opposite of how a lot of other instruments are taught. I have also found, again, in my training, it is easier to get a student to add more tension to their stroke to create more articulation than it is to teach them how to play articulately and then try to later in their lifetime try to get them to loosen up. That is a far longer road to travel that direction, okay? So we start with that legato stroke. So then we get to the next part, which is we want to talk about the downstroke, okay? On the downstroke, the key to me is these back fingers not being too involved. Again, this may be different than what you have been taught. For me, the downstroke is that I literally just don't bring the hand back up. All I'm doing is I'm just throwing it down and then not letting it return. So if I go back to the tennis ball, there is a little bit of a rebound on the downstroke, but what I'm not doing is creating a different sound out of the instrument, okay? I marched drum corps under Ralph Hardiman, and I remember one of the things that he preached to us constantly was all strokes are created equal, right? So his idea was we play the drum the same way all the time. The thing that changes is the height at which we are attacking what we're playing, okay? So if we take this motion and then don't let it come back up, that becomes the downstroke. That is different than, which right there, I'm putting more tension in the back of the hand, creating that more articulated sound. Again, there are places in the music where that may be the sound that we're looking for, but I don't want that to be our default approach. I want our default approach to be as relaxed as we can get. So, okay? Then, the tap stroke, again, all I'm doing is taking this stroke and playing it from a lower note. I don't want to do anything different from here. Okay? Again, there's no additional tension in the back of the hand. And the way that I equate taps a lot of times with my students is that if they're set and ready to play, they're at tap height most of the time anyway. So I don't want them lifting to play the taps. I want them literally playing down. Right? If you lift, what I find most of the time, and I find this a ton on concert standard drum too, students try to play higher to play soft, and then they try to play lighter, which is the opposite of what you want to do. You want to play low and heavy, right? So when I'm playing taps, I'm playing down into the head, okay? Rather than trying to play up here and play light. So you've got pull, down, down, and then up. It's just coming up from that stroke, which the upstroke is also many times your soft timpani stroke, right? So as you can see, the whole idea is that all of this is interrelated, okay? Same thing on concert snare drum. The difference between concert snare drum and marching snare drum is the head that you're using, the weight of the stick that you're using, right? And the heavier stick on the marching drum is going to create more weight down into the head. You're using a lighter stick on the concert snare drum, right? I'm not changing my stroke. I changed the stick and I changed the surface I was playing, okay? And that's one of the key tenets to this whole thing is that you don't want to change how you play the instrument. We don't have time to have different ways of playing every single instrument that we play, right? Now, here's the other thing, is that a lot of this approach, which if you're into like the drum corps thing and stuff like that, is usually known as the West Coast style, okay? The actual roots of it are this, right? The approach is that you want the, again, if you're playing like a drum set, if you're playing drum set and you're playing like a ride pattern on the drum set, okay? You have to let the stick bounce, you have to let the stick do the work to get like a good, right? If you go up and you play, probably everybody that's on the bandstand with you is going to go and wonder what you're doing back there, right? Because that sound, when we put it on this cymbal, it sounds wrong, right? But if then we've got something. We go to a triplo versus, that's just like pretty much impossible to do, okay? So then, when we start doing things like basic double beat exercises, like you all know this, right? Irish spring, shuffle beat, Sanford shuffle, it goes by like many, many names. The idea is we're throwing that stick at the head, and the one motion that we throw it at a speed at which we get the two notes. I'm not thinking one individual hand motion for each stroke that I'm going to play. Right? If I put that on the ride cymbal, it's that. Right? I want that bounce to what I'm doing, okay? So it's the same thing on all of these instruments. Right? Everything is loose, everything is fluid, everything is letting the rebound do the work for you, okay? The other thing that I notice a lot of times that we've got to make sure that we think about is that with these back fingers back here, you want to leave room for the stick to move in the back of the hand, okay? Two places that I oftentimes see tension from students is in what they call the fulcrum area up here, right? This gets very closed off. You look like you're doing like the white knuckle ride, right, on a roller coaster or something. Or back here in the back of the grip, okay? What you want to do, the way I teach it, again, we teach the same approach on the marching snare drum, is you remember when the hand was down to the side? This was not closed up when you were hanging your hand down there, was it? It was loose and open and all these muscles were relaxed, okay? So we want the same thing when we're holding the stick. That space should still be in there, okay? And that space is still there even on here. The other thing is that a lot of people learn the idea of the fulcrum being up here, right? I actually teach it here, right? So I teach the fulcrum as being the middle finger, right? Because again, what I'm wanting to do is not have more tension up here in the front of the grip. This is just kind of along for the ride, right? But where I'm actually controlling things is from the middle finger. What that does is that allows the stick to move a little bit more freely because there's nothing in the front of the grip impeding the stick from returning, okay? So if I play from the front of the grip, the other thing is in the back of the hand, if I have this clenched off, you'll notice the stick doesn't really move very much in the back. It's a very direct up and down. If I relax the back of the hand, you'll notice how much more the stick moves in the back. And listen to, everybody close their eyes for a second. Listen to the difference in this sound. Now, do you hear how it opens up and becomes more resonant the second time? That was when I relaxed the fingers in the back, okay? I'm not saying don't use the fingers because we're about to talk about how to use the fingers, right? But the fingers, everything has to be used in like its right sequencing of events. All right, does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so we've got the 4 strokes. We've talked about using the arm to throw the stick, okay? There will be times where you want to play more than this. Okay? As things get faster, you usually work your way down to like smaller muscles. Right? So let's talk about the fingers for a second. Okay? The fingers are something that speed comes from the fingers a lot of the time. Okay? And fingers are something that a lot of people don't work on developing enough. Okay, so here's a quick, if you've got a stick near you or something, I'm about to show you like a quick exercise that you can use to develop finger dexterity that can help you on, I've used it with students working on timpani, working on snare drum, everything, okay? So it's called going around the world. So what you do is you actually start in double traditional grip, all right? So what you're gonna do is you basically play like 8 on a hand, but you only use the thumb to move the stick. So for example, if I start here, as I'm doing this, I'm switching to here, because the next thing I'm going to do is use the index finger to move the stick. Right? Then I move it to here. I'm going to use the middle finger. Go to here, use the ring finger. So you can turn this into a whole exercise where all you're doing is working on actually using all these fingers this is a Murray Gusick exercise that he calls finger calisthenics, okay? But it is a great exercise because many, many times when we need to go to use our fingers for something, they're stiff, we haven't used them a lot. And this is a great exercise for like working on like limbering all of this up and training. It can also be really useful, for example, if you're working on timpani technique. Many, many times I'll have my students put the mallets in here, work on this motion, to work on getting that rotation when they go to play. This is also the rotation in Stephen's grip, right? So again, all of this stuff kind of interrelates with each other, okay? So, arm, wrist, fingers, working around the world, okay? So then, a couple of other things to wrap up with this. One, when it comes to rolls, tension kills, okay? On a marching drum or a concert drum, getting a good buzz, which my drum line will tell you that I'm overly obsessive about their drum rolls, about their buzz rolls on drum line. Right. The key to a good orchestral style roll is rhythm, right? Back to everything we talked about. In that, a good orchestral roll is basically triple strokes, right? So if I start, I have no idea what this is about to sound like, because I don't. So if I play a roll. Develop your orchestral roll, practice playing triple strokes. And not the drum line kind of triple strokes where, you know, we all know this like exercise. Right, we all know that, right? You want to get one stroke out of one motion. So your hands are basically playing eighth notes. That works on your orchestral type roll, okay? What I find many, many times is students press into the head too much when they play the roll, and so that's where they get backslided. So what I will oftentimes do, the most often used roll exercise in my studio, I have copyrighted this. None of you can use it without paying me rights. This is highly original. No one in here has ever played this before. This is our roll exercise. Cutting edge, right? Yeah, you can all applaud. It's that impressive. So what we do with it is I make them play that with 2 strokes, 3 strokes, and 4 strokes. Right? So we go from 2s, 3s, to 4s. The idea being that we want to be able to control the amount of strokes that are in there depending on the drum we're playing on, the hall that we're playing in, etc. And all of that is coming from the middle finger, right? We start with the check. And the whole idea that I tell them is like I have them videotape themselves. Videotape, that's old. I have them video themselves. All right, and the idea is that I want their hands to look exactly the same as they change the different stroke. Right, the hand motion remains the same. The only thing that I change is what I'm doing right in here. Okay, yes. Oh, that's the 5-minute sign? Okay. All right. And that's what we do a lot to work on our rolls. The other thing that I'll do is if they're playing like a standard or etude or something, I will make them play it as much with all of the rolls being open double stroke rolls as orchestral rolls. Okay. The idea being that I want them to be thinking of the roll more rhythmically with like its rhythmic bass and everything. And I also find that if they're playing like One, I'm not going to tilt the keyboard, obviously, though my students have inadvertently tried on numerous occasions, because it doesn't matter how we mark this, they're going to get it at all sorts of different funky angles and everything else, okay? So when we talk about all of this on keyboards, we again want to work from a very legato place. Right? Now, the mallets are not going to naturally rebound up like they do in a snare drum, right? So we have to create more of that motion where we are bringing the mallets up, but we want it to be one fluid motion that way, okay? So I'm still thinking about that throwing motion as I do it. Right? I know that many people teach the piston. That, to me, works, but I use that as a secondary motion because, to me, that is more using the wrist. And I want to teach you more of the arm first. The other thing that I want my students to do is feel like they're playing down to the resonators, okay? Many times when I see students first learn how to do like things from like a piston stroke perspective, they play very off the keys. And so you get a little bit thinner sound versus again, it's that whole maximum sound for minimal effort idea. So this is also the same way that we teach our front ensemble, right? We teach our front ensemble the same approach. Again, we don't want to teach marching band marimba, we just want to teach marimba. There are microphones everywhere. We don't need to like learn how to play super loud, okay? The other thing that we actually do that is we actually, our marimba players play Stevens grip, our vibraphone players do play Burton grip. Because to me, it just lays more naturally on the instrument. I play Burton grip like regularly on everything. Our marimba teacher, Yoon Ju Pan, plays Burton grip on everything. The point of this is, you can play any of these instruments with any of these grips, right? All that matters is, do you sound great as you do it, okay? So we teach this stroke, then we go down to the wrist, which is a different color, right? Then we go down to the fingers, which is again a different color, okay? So Pius Chung, if you've ever heard of him, has a phenomenal book out called Colors for Marimba, where he goes into these different stroke types that he uses, all right? So he goes from the fingers, wrist, arm and wrist, to what he calls the shoulders, which is how you get that big sound without it sounding like you're like breaking everything, right? Okay? But that's all related to the stroke types that we talked about in the beginning on snare drum, right? It's all interrelated in that way, okay? So the idea is get as much sound as you can while doing as little work as you can do, okay? If you feel tension in your body when you're playing, that is your body telling you you've done something incorrectly, okay? We, as percussionists, have this sort of like machismo, like the whole no pain, no gain kind of thing. You have to know where the line is between building like some chops and stuff like that, where you get that little bit of burn, and where you're like actually frying your tendons and everything else, okay? So you want to make sure that you aren't feeling that as you play, all right? So any very, very quick questions, because I know that we are running out of time. I'll be around for a minute if you like want to have a discussion about anything. I know this, I could talk for a long time about this stuff. But be safe with yourselves when you play. I think that's the big thing. Like, it should feel good to play. And here's the thing, is that if you play with a loose, relaxed technique, you're not going to have hand problems when you're old. I'm 50 years old, and I can like pretty comfortably walk up and start playing without like hurting myself. Okay, and I think that that's a cool thing to do. I need to thank Yamaha, Sabian, Remo, Innovative Percussion, Beetle Percussion, Black Swamp Percussion for like helping me like do all of these things and stuff like that. Again, Mississippi PS, you all have been awesome because you guys, you are rocking it over here. I don't know if you know that, but I come from a different state. I can tell you that. You guys are doing great things. So thank you all very much for listening to what I have to say.